Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at something which there's a lot of positives and no doubt there'll be some negatives, especially in that comment section. This is the Sapphire RX6500XT. Let's do this. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at this Sapphire Radeon RX6500XT. This is one of those videos that I kind of want to make, but on the other hand I don't. I know there's going to be a lot of you out there which are going to be seeing other reviews and immediately you've already made up your own minds about this card. You've also seen the price, you've seen the specifications, you've also made up your minds on that side of things as well. Now, I'm going to be trying to put a somewhat positive spin on this card, and for good reason. Actually, in my testing, we'll get this out of the way straight away. In my testing, I've done some gaming, I've been using it actually on the PC behind me. You can see that actually the card is still in there currently. I did actually buy two of them by mistake, but that's another story altogether. I've got to be honest with you, I'm very happy with it. And I didn't think I was going to be. I genuinely thought this was going to be basically kind of just the next step up from APU gaming. But for anyone who's actually considering getting one of these, now I know at the moment pricing etc is entirely mental. We're going to be basing this on what I actually paid here in January 2022. Now depending on when you're watching this video, things may have changed dramatically, and in fact towards the end of this month there is going to be the RTX 3050 coming out, which could put a completely different spin on what I'm saying on this video. But I'm not a time traveler, so all I can do is give you the information I have to this point right now. So please, again, do bear that in mind when you're putting your comments down below. So let's start off first of all with pricing. Now, actually, I did buy two of these, the other boxes here. So I purchased one from CCL here in the UK and the other one from overclockers.co.uk. Now, I bought the CCL one first of all with a case. That was, I believe, this one. I did write on the box, yeah, CCL. This one actually cost me $229.99. Which at the time I figured I was getting somewhat of a bargain, or at least was able to get a graphics card in 2022 as things stand. Shortly after, we did find on overclockers.co.uk, one of our kind Discord members actually put it on the site, and this was available at $179.99. So if we take a kind of aggregate between the two, and for the purpose of this video and going forward, I'm going to be classing this as a £200 graphics card, which it is kind of still available for in some places. Now obviously there's going to be some stores which are out of stock completely, there's going to be some who've got stock and have elevated prices, but realistically once things kind of settle down a little bit, this should be retailing somewhere in the region of about £200, or at least that is somewhere near what the recommended retail price should be. Again, not a time traveller, I don't have a TARDIS, well I do, but not one that actually moves in time. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, so for this purpose, this is a £200 graphics card. So with that out of the way, so we've got the Sapphire card, as you can see. We'll run through some of the specs, but most of you already know this anyway. This is the OC version. It kind of is, but it isn't. Most of the cards on the market will kind of boost to similar sort of speeds. They do say this has a boost clock of somewhere in the region of about 28-25 megahertz. I've actually managed to get this up to 2915 just in the default settings. All I have done with this one is, as you'll probably see from some of the B-roll later on, I have actually taken it apart, had a look inside, and when I put it back together I did repaste it. I did use RTX MX5 when repasting, so whether or not that has had some effect and actually has allowed it to boost a little bit higher, not entirely sure. I have got another card exactly the same, like I said, so I am actually going to do a comparison after. One I haven't taken apart, one I have, just to see if there is any difference at all. That might be a little bit interesting if you want to see the results of that. Don't forget to stay subscribed. So anyway, specifications. So as we know, PCI Express Gen 4 x 4, not great. Ideally you want to be using this on a modern B550 chipset if at all possible, and ideally with a processor such as the Ryzen 5 3600. That would be ideal choice, and in fact that is what I've based my testing on today, with 16 gigs of RAM, B550 MSI motherboard, and it runs really well. I'll be honest with you, it really does run considerably better than I was expecting. Anyway, so this is designed for 1080p gaming, as of most graphics cards of the last 5 years or more. 4 gigs of RAM, which, yeah, again, we kind of understand why it's 4 gigs. It's not great, it's not ideal, but it is the way things are. Again, it says about the PCIe 4.0. I will be doing some testing later on with other chipsets and other processors just to see if it makes a great deal of difference. I think personally, realistically, without being overly anal or analytic about it and trying to get into the real minutiae of details, running at PCI Express Gen 4 x 4 is going to be hit or miss, depending on your system, depending on your processor, RAM, etc, etc. Lots of other variable factors. There's one of the reasons why I don't like benchmarking. Now, you're probably going to be seeing lots of footage of gameplay, and there'll be the Radeon software running alongside, so you yourselves can keep an eye on things such as memory usage, GPU usage, temperatures, etc, etc. Anyway, that is it. So it's RDNA 2 architecture, HDMI output. You can tell when things are getting bad in the GPU market when one of the largest logos on the box is basically telling you it's got an HDMI port. Yeah. Okay, so on the back it talks about other things, minimum system requirements, etc. This of course does have ray tracing enabled in it in hardware. There are 16 ray tracing cores, which is kind of pointless really, especially on this level of card. Now from what we can tell, from what we've heard in the press rumours, and also from one of AMD's own internal bodies, is that the 6500XT effectively is a laptop GPU, and it's kind of been fudged to run on a PCI Express card, hence why it's PCI Express Gen 4 x 4, etc, etc, etc. Tiny little die size. It isn't designed really to be put in a PC. But over the last 2 years, because of various factors across the world, which I'm not going to say, there has been a massive shortage of graphics cards, full stop. We have been crying out for a graphics card, which is a usable graphics card, which is better than onboard, but not going to cost an absolute fortune. We've been absolutely desperate for it. And this is essentially the answer to it. It isn't great, it isn't what we wanted, but it does fit the gap in the market. And it does fit it, actually, I feel, quite well. Anyway, so yeah, I'm rambling on now. So 400 watt power supply is what they're recommended on this. So essentially, if you've got like a Dell PC, some sort of pre-built thing, even an older PC, power-wise, you're going to be absolutely fine. I found that actually in testing, my card actually only drew, I think, a maximum of around about 90 watts, which, yeah, is brilliant. I do know that these are meant to run up to a maximum of about 105, I believe it is. Again, depending on the models, branding, etc, etc. But anyway, let's take a look at the card and see what we actually get. Now, you'll be seeing some footage as well from the other card, which I actually did take apart. So you'll be seeing some close-ups of this as well. But essentially, all you get, quick start guide, as per usual, and a little card to say where it's manufactured, etc, etc. And that is essentially it. There's not a great deal else included, other than the graphics card and a little bit of foam to keep it all nice and safe in transit. Now, as you can see, this one has still got the plastics on and the caps on the ports, etc. So let's start off with the fans. So we've got two fans on there. These fans are really super quiet. Now, I haven't actually registered the RPMs on these. Actually, I might have it in the software, H hardware monitor, which I've been running, and probably is on the other software from the Radeon software suite. So I'll put those on the screen now. Most of the time it's completely silent. There's only a few occasions where I noticed it ramp up, and that was when you turn the PC on for the first time and it kind of goes into that full speed mode and you get that whoosh, but then after that it goes into basically zero fan mode. So in normal Windows usage, this thing literally sips power somewhere in the region of about 5 to 10 watts, which is basically nothing. So the fans don't need to spin up and the temperatures are super low. The lowest temperatures recorded on this were, I believe it's 27 and 28 degrees. So that's 27 degrees for the GPU as a whole and 28 degrees for the hotspot. When it was under full load for gaming over a extended period, maximum temperatures raised on there, I believe was 59 degrees for the GPU and oddly enough 81 degrees for the hotspot, which I personally thought was a little bit on the warm side. It's going to be interesting to see if there's other people that have measured their temperatures and is your hotspot getting to that kind of temperature. It's certainly lower than some of the previous cards. Hotspots can get up to easily up into the 90s. I know my 5700XT does hit 85 and beyond quite often if cooling isn't up to scratch in the PC. So yeah, fan wise, looks brilliant, love it. The stickers in the middle appear to have been actually put on by someone who knows what they're doing, and they're centralized so you don't get those wiggly lines. So if you are going to be vertical mounting your GPU, it's going to look absolutely brilliant. You do have the Pulse kind of logos and layout here. I'm not a great fan of the Pulse design, I'll be honest with you. The red highlights, etc. and accents, for some people it's going to be great and they're going to love it. Personally, I would have preferred that to be white or some other kind of nondescript colour, even like a grey or something, or silver. That does, in some instances, if you're doing a themed build, it does kind of dictate some of the colours that you may want to add, or remove, so to speak. So fans are great. The fans are actually relatively easy to replace, although you do have to disassemble the whole thing, so the backplate, all of the fan shroud, and then some more screws actually to take the fans out, whereas on some previous graphics cards it was easy, you could just kind of find the screw in between the blades, undo them, and you could take them out. On this, they're actually quite difficult to replace, but hopefully they won't need replacing. It does come with a 2-year warranty as standard, so that's all good. On the side, again, I'll leave the wrapping on here, but you can see it's actually quite a nice layout. You've got the metal backplate on the top and the plastic surround. You've got the Sapphire and Radeon logos there. Of course, there is a 6-pin power connector, which denotes the low power requirements for this. It's a shame actually they couldn't tweak it down a little bit further to have it PCI Express slot powered. I think that would actually been a really cool thing. You never know, they might do a lower powered version of this, the RX6500 non-XT, which doesn't require external power. Yeah, I'm not too sure if we're going to be really looking forward to that one or not, but anyway, there you go. On the back there you can see the fin array and also some more plastic and some more design language going on there. On the back of the card you've got the Pulse logo, Radeon logo, and actually there is something actually in the red paint in there, some sort of almost like a UV reactive type paint added into the red. So if you've got RGB, it does actually make that red pulse under different colours, and you'll definitely be seeing some B-roll of that. Actually, I looked at it a few times and I was like, is there actually LEDs in there? And when I took it all apart, I realised no, there isn't any LEDs in there. It's just where the reactive paint actually, with the LEDs in the case, it does actually pulse. So it certainly lives up to its name in that regard. An area where it doesn't get a whole lot of loving is in this back section. So because this is obviously cut down, they have skimmed wherever possible, and we've only got 2 outputs. So we've got an HDMI output, and also there is a DisplayPort output. So yeah, dual monitor setups are going to be okay. Again, realistically, for what this is, for what the market needed, it does fit the bill. Which, I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with that, saying that it should have double the memory, double the bandwidth, it should have been PCI Express Gen 3 times 16, or at least PCI Express Gen 4 times 8. It should have had 8 gigs of RAM, etc, etc, etc. RAM is super expensive at the moment. Everything's expensive, and obviously that cost goes on and on and on. So a 5% increase in RAM price in one place, it gets knocked on through the various suppliers. Everyone kicks the can along until we get it at the very end. And the same is true for shipping prices. Shipping prices are insane, literally insane. And also even just postage, getting these things from the retailer to your door isn't a cheap thing to do anymore. Insurance, etc. It's all mounted up. So when we look at this card and say, that's a £200 plus card, the specs aren't great. And even if we look at slightly older cards, well, actually much older cards, something like the RX480, the RX580, 570 kind of class, this is actually kind of really where this product fits, or what it at least competes with, albeit it does it at a significantly lower wattage rating, which, yeah, I guess the way the world's going, we're all trying to save energy, etc. So if we're getting a similar performance but for drastically less wattage, then I guess we have improved in some areas. But sadly, going back to the displays, yeah, one DisplayPort, one HDMI, which I actually think is fine for the intended market for this, which is effectively gamers. I think that's absolutely fine. And for people that are not happy with the APU but don't want to spend £300, maybe £400 on a graphics card, but they're kind of comfortable spending somewhere between the 150 and 250 mark, that is where this card kicks in. It really does. So that's it for a tour of the external parts. Let's take a look at the internal parts now. We see the cooler now, so you've got a nice big fin array, you've got a dual heat pipe design. There is a copper slug right in the very middle there. It is absolutely tiny, but as is the chip on the card itself. And if we take a look at the card itself, you can see there are 2 memory chips. Now those are 2 2 gig chips. There isn't any chips on the back of the card, as again you'll be seeing from some B-roll. And the actual backplate itself doesn't make contact with any area of the graphics card at all. In fact, there are 2 spacers on there to actually prevent the backplate from touching the card. So the backplate itself is a purely cosmetic addition. Let me know in the comments, would you have preferred to have seen a bare card, so not have anything on the back here, but maybe have, I don't know, a extra feature somewhere else? Maybe a little bit more RAM, maybe another connection. Don't know, let me know. I'll be interested to see what your thoughts are on that. I don't think the backplate itself would really add a great deal of cost to the actual card itself, and I think if they took the backplate off and still kept it as exactly the same spec, I think people would be potentially even more upset. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. One thing of note, when you're actually taking this apart, if you are planning to repaste it yourself or do any modifications, actually removing the fan connector from the board was extremely difficult. It does seem they've added an extra 2 kind of little lugs on the very end, which do need pressing in if possible, or you will have to brute force the cable out of there. So do bear that in mind if you find yours is a little bit stuck if you're trying to take it apart. So that's it for the inside and the outside. What is really important is gaming performance. So let's take a look at some games now, and you can see what the performance is like in some of my favorite games. So we're going to be having some CSGO, which is an old favorite, and obviously it is more CPU bound than it is GPU bound, but certainly still a very popular title, almost 20 years or more onwards. Then we're going to be taking a look at some Cyberpunk, so we're going completely the opposite direction to a game which is heavily GPU optimized and runs on basically a CPU potato. But you can see here we're getting somewhere in the region of, in more congested areas, lows of about 45 frames per second, but in other areas we are getting over that 60 frames per second, and sometimes peaking above that. Again, the game does change massively depending where you are on the map. The settings, as you've probably seen at the very beginning, we're looking at 1080p. Mostly we're looking at medium settings. I did try on high, and it was extremely slow. We were kind of in the console area, running about 30 frames per second, but knocking that down to medium did make a massive difference and made it considerably more playable. Moving on to another game, so let's take a look at a racing title. So we're going to be taking a look at Wreckfest, which is actually one of those games which can be surprisingly heavy on your graphics card, mostly due to the texture details. It does make a lot of use of VRAM, which sadly in this little sucker there isn't a great deal of it to spare, so we do have to dial in the settings a little bit. But even so, we are getting some very playable experience on here. 60 frames per second pretty much easily in the higher settings, and we do find at the very beginning of most of the maps or laps or tracks or whatever you want to call them, we do get some real lows, so it's anywhere between 30 and 45 frames per second. But actually when racing gets going and when the pack thins out a little bit, we do see some much better results there. And actually one thing I did notice, if you look quite closely at the footage, even though this footage is 1080p and we are putting this video out in 4K, so there is obviously going to be quite a lot of down sampling there, but actually it still looks really good. There is some kind of new sharpening filter, I feel, in this 6500XT, which, I don't know, just makes everything look just that little bit sharper. Let me know what you think in the comments. So also, being that this is a 1080p card and is kind of aimed towards the esports market, we couldn't not have a look at Rocket League. So in Rocket League, again, 1080p, usual settings, let it default to mostly high, even ultra I think in some respects, and extremely playable. Very little lag. I do find even with some other graphics cards, my 5700XT, at some points I do actually get some frame time lag. Weirdly, I'm not entirely sure why, but the 6500XT managed to play the game, and actually I was playing pretty well. I was surprised. Normally you can tell how good or bad a graphics card is of what your gameplay is like. If it improves your gameplay, the card is doing its job because it's giving you nice smooth frames and allowing you to be the best you can at your game. And in this particular instance, the 6500XT actually, proved the point and was very good. We were getting frames of anywhere up to 200 frames per second, which is absolutely perfect for this kind of title. And if you're playing this on a 165Hz 1080p monitor, you're going to be extremely happy. Now let's take a look at something which is almost kind of a mid-range between the two. So it's a little bit CPU bound, but mostly GPU bound. Let's take a look at Far Cry New Dawn. Now this is using the Junior engine, which is very common in a lot of these games. And actually it runs particularly well. I was quite surprised just running the built-in benchmark. Did a couple of runs in various settings, but either way, you're going to be happy. So you're going to be getting at least 60 frames per second most of the time. You can see from the tests there what the results we're getting. Very, very good gameplay. And the lows weren't as low as I had expected them to be. I was thinking that the lows were really going to dip and tank quite hard. But actually, they don't seem to be, and they have remained relatively stable all the way through the benchmark. Which, again, is something which can't be said for some other more higher powered cards, where they ramp up to extremely high frames and then dip down to very low lows. That is the one thing which I think is probably going to be one of the main takeaways of the 6500 XT in terms of its balance. It is what it is. It's a low-end 1080p graphics card in terms of what is available on the market. If you've got a graphics card such as like I said earlier, RX580, is there any point in getting this card? Realistically, no. If you're buying or building a brand new PC now with a new Ryzen processor, with a new Intel processor, preferably with PCI Express Gen 4 support, this is great. It really is. There isn't another option on the new market. There isn't. There is nothing else that even comes close to it in terms of what you get for your money. Now, I know, again, we're going to go over it again. This is a heavily restricted card. The PCI Express bandwidth, the RAM, 64-bit bus, only 2 outputs. Everything on paper says this card should be junk. But I'll be honest, I bought 2 of these and I could quite easily send one of them back under a 30-day return thing. But after actually using it for best part of a day today and enjoying it and using it, I'm actually very impressed. This is not going to be a popular thing. People are not going to be happy with me saying that. I know that is the case. But we have to take into consideration what is available on the market, the whole kind of silicon shortage, supply shortages everywhere. We aren't overloaded with choices, and we aren't living in the market we were even 2 years ago. This is a new market, a new era we're going into. Prices are going to start increasing. We've already seen in the UK especially, we've got inflation which is getting to all-time highs, but we haven't seen in like 30 years. So things potentially aren't going to get a great deal better in the short term. Historically, £200 graphics card should be better than this. But I think for now and the immediate future, I think for around about £200, even though it isn't great, it certainly gets the seal of approval from me. So let me know what you think about this one in the comments section below. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you think that at the moment, for in the region of kind of 180 to maybe £230, do you think this actually makes sense at the moment? And if you don't think it makes sense, please let me know why, because I really want to know. I think it makes a lot of sense, and in fact I don't think there's anything else on the market which can come near it, unless you want to spend the next level up, which is kind of £350 to £400, which a lot of people feel uncomfortable spending that much money on a PC parts, and I completely feel for you there. I know exactly where you're coming from. Even spending £200 on this made me feel a little bit cautious, but what other choices do we have in 2022, or at least at the moment? So anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up now. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll be hearing from you in that comment section. Please let rip. Thanks for watching.